Hello, dear empaths, and non-empaths too. Thank you for feeling deeply for my thumbnail and clicking on this video. So you discovered you're an empath, and now you want to know what you need to do in order to, be a better empath or access your empathy the right way. You're actually probably hoping to find out how to live with all these feels you're experiencing all the time. And I'm here to help you figure out this gift that you were blessed with. But I'm also here to explain the process you're going through. And in order to do that, we should probably take a step back and explain to all the non-empathic plebs what empathy is. Empathy is a feeling, a process, a concept that is often confused with other similar concepts. Some of these I've never heard of before, and reading about them had my life flashing before my eyes. Oh my god, was I dying? Death by reading, that would be a new one. For instance, whereas empathy is an emotional response of feeling similar feelings to someone else's, compathy is feeling the same emotion due to shared circumstances. Another example is transpathy, where you get infected by someone else's emotions, and I've been in those rooms before, as opposed to empathy that results in feeling or understanding the emotion to the point where you still recognize that those are your feelings, not somebody else's. The most common confusion of empathy is with the concept of sympathy, but sympathy is something else. It's described as feeling for someone as opposed to feeling as someone. Sympathy is feeling concern for someone who's experiencing anger or sadness and not feeling angry or sad yourself. Even more confusion can happen when we completely mock it up by interpreting someone's sadness as, for example, anger, and being angry as we think they are, which is a total and colossal failure of empathy. But at least we tried. In some situations, we don't even bother trying and just decide what somebody else is feeling. That's not a failure of empathy. That's just being a dick. And you know who you are, you dick. It's actually more than just being a dick, but we'll get there, later. In the meanwhile, I have bad news for everybody involved, empaths and dicks alike. Everybody has the ability to have empathy. Literally everybody, even psychopaths, just not necessarily in the same way. Some get automatic bursts of empathy with very little prompt and are flooded with feelings. Others stay somewhat detached and can understand what someone is experiencing. Therapists come to mind, and they get there by taking someone else's perspective. The proverbial walk of a mile in someone else's shoes. How emotionally unsanitary. Our mind's baseline is to assume that everybody feels, thinks and acts just like us. Taking the perspective of another individual takes time and effort, finding out who they actually are, their characteristics and motivations. And none of us signed up for that. Strictly speaking, taking the perspective of the other is not the only way to reach the state of empathy. We can, for instance, read their facial expressions and feel as they do without putting ourselves in their place. But what if we don't have access to their facial expressions because, for instance, all we have is a third-person account of someone's predicament, or the individual is incapable, temporarily or permanently, of exhibiting facial expressions that we can recognize as any kind of emotion? We might still experience empathy by accessing our own memories of similar events, but that stuff is for empaths. And if you're not an empath, automatic or purposeful perspective taking is our only path to enlightenment. Or, in other words, it's the logical way to eliminate all emotions. Ugh, smash! So this must mean that we're all empathizing all the time, right? Taking the perspective of others left and right? That's clearly not true. So what's going on? Well, there are just too many things that prevent us from taking the perspective of another and even ignore or not see their emotional state at all. because we're all dicks. I'm joking, kinda. This part is a little hard to settle. After all, I already made the claim that everybody empathizes, even psychopaths, even these kinds of people. What I mean here is that we only empathize sometimes with some individuals. For the most part, empathy is automatic, but it's also heavily dependent on context. We may feel all the feels as one group, but fail to feel as another, for so many reasons. For instance, your similarity to someone can make it more likely for you to empathize. Yeah, you know what I mean. If you like and appreciate them, it's easier for sure. If you're in a bad mood that day, everyone's feelings seem stupid in comparison to yours. And sometimes you are like scrolling the feed and something comes up and you go, fuck, I don't want to feel like that today. Or ever, and done. Empathy avoided. Rarely do we go the other way and take it in or try to take another's perspective to understand their feelings more. It's hard. People have a strong preference not to be empathic. Remember I mentioned these people? Monsters, really. Turns out they actually feel empathy to the same degree as non-monsters when it comes to some kids, but feel very little empathy towards their own victims. This allows the monsters to keep victimizing since they can claim that they are not harming the kids. So yeah, context is impeding our ability to empathize sometimes. But the thing is, we can actually reflect upon control and modify our empathic reaction in various ways. And I think we should do it more. Like do the work by purposefully putting our own bullshit aside and, say it with me, taking the perspective of others. Are you an empath yet? You stop being an empath. No, for real. Being an empath is nice, but being compassionate is better. It's the next stage of enlightenment, if you will. Constant empathy can cause an emotional burnout. Compassion is confused with empathy sometimes, but they're different in their emotional involvement. Wouldn't it be nice to not constantly burn out from feeling everything all the goddamn time, but also not be a dick? Compassion can give you that relief because compassion is actually more closely related to sympathy rather than empathy. In fact, compassion is a combination of sympathy and pity in one process. It's two things at once, so it's better. It's also better because it creates a stronger motivation to help than in case of empathy, and it gives you the clarity of mind needed to keep helping. How do we transcend to the state of compassion? I think we need to put our feelings aside a bit and concentrate on those who need our help, but that's just an intuition. Ooh, what is intuition? I'm gonna be here forever, aren't I? Just kidding. I'm putting a link in the description for a very helpful paper for your transition from an empath to a compassionist. Compassionist? Oh, and there's part 5. Welcome to my social experiment, in which I'm going to attempt to measure perspective taking as a transitional component from empathy and lack of empathy to compassion. Proceed watching if you're willing to participate. In the next few minutes, you're going to receive a third-party recount of a true event. To avoid transference of my emotions to you and to isolate perspective taking, I will remain silent and a friend will recount this event in as dispassionate a way as possible while using neutral language. Let's begin.
There are 1.57 billion cows in the world, most of whom were conceived in the process called artificial insemination. The process of artificial insemination is as follows. A farmer will track heat of a cow by looking at her behavior and vaginal discharge. When the cow is in heat, a farmer locks her in a calving pen or a headlock. He puts on a long glove, applies lubricant, and inserts his arm into the rectum of a cow. He moves his arm back and forth, functionally trying to clear the cow's rectum from excrement. Then he grabs the cervix through the rectal wall, inserts an insemination rod into the cow's vagina, and injects the semen.
There are 2 characters in this event. If you never considered the perspective of either, please try to take the perspective of both while considering the emotional state of both. If you only ever considered the perspective of one, please try to take the perspective of the other. Give it a real effort. Let me know in the comments if this led to you experiencing empathy or compassion. If you considered both in the past, don't comment anything regarding this experiment. Shit, I just tanked my engagement. Maybe share this video instead. And if you subscribe, I will see you next time.